Hello, everyone. This is Collapse Club, the podcast. I'm David Baum in Seattle. I'm with my friend and colleague Matthew Paynton in England. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, David.
Today we're going to discuss a fundamental idea in deep adaptation and Collapse Club, Matthew's idea of distress versus enlivenment. Matthew, could you kick us off with a summary of what that means to you?
Yeah. Um, I talk to a lot of people. We talk to a lot of people who are deeply, deeply distressed by the state of the world and who are experiencing reality as an assault, a psychic assault. To be situated in a planet, to be alive and conscious and aware at a time of planetary crisis and catastrophe and impending collapse and corruption and all-round weirdness is inherently distressing. It's a perpetual psychic assault. It's a burden on the soul, and that's for people who are, we're generally talking to people who are in that strange ground between catastrophe, realization, and looming disaster. It's different for people who are already marginalized, impoverished, in war. Generally, that's not the people we're talking to. It's we have solidarity for those people, but the people we're talking about are people who are realizing the scope, scale, and momentum of the crisis. And it's a burden on the soul. It's a perpetual burden on the soul. And a lot of people compartmentalize against it, dissociate, ignore, deny. But some of us are sensitized to this planetary catastrophe. So I can remember a few years back thinking, so is this it? Is this it? I'm just going to be waiting for, in despair and grief, for doom to arrive now. And I have to wrestle with despair and grief pretty much every day of my life. But I'm also perpetually asking myself and trying to direct my attention and the attention of the groups we're in to what's still possible, what's still beautiful, what's still inherently worthwhile. And it's a practice and it's a process. It doesn't just happen. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question in a deliberately provocative way. So understand this is deliberate with the intention of getting to something deeper. You're describing the people who are in between, not experiencing collapse, but have the capacity to see it. Those are generally, in our experience, white people from the global north who have the time and the sort of space in their lives to contemplate these things. What does it matter how those people feel? I mean, I devote my life to helping those people, gather in groups, so I have my own thoughts. I'm not being serious, but I'm asking, what does it matter what we white people suffer?
Yeah, good question. It's not just about mood management. That's not what deep adaptation is about. It's about what's inherently worth it while doing? What difference can we make? What can we save? What can we reconcile? What can we do in solidarity? And for me, it's always the recognition that how this unfolds, the trajectory is pretty determined, but the details of how this unfold are far from determined. And that making a difference on whatever scale is enlivening. So it's not waiting around for the worst to happen. And I think the worst that can happen or could happen or might happen is when unmetabolized distress kicks off and you get violent, eruptive, fearful reactions. And I don't think that's set in stone yet. The worst possible outcomes aren't set in stone. And there is always some leverage, some difference that we can make. And that tends to be enlivening in some way. The difference that we can make will be enlivening. And it's an alternative to just waiting around for doom.
In the community, we talk about inner work versus outer work. Inner work being the sort of psychological and emotional processing that we do in our meetings, and outer work being things like anything from protest to homesteading to helping the homeless, the traditional sort of go out in the world and make it better. I worry sometimes that our work in the Collapse Club meetings is strictly inner work, and that maybe no, I do not worry. It was a choice to focus on the inner work in Collapse Club, with the understanding that when people have done their inner work, then they're equipped to go and do outer work, whatever it is. People who are in a state of distress and chaos in their minds and their souls are not equipped to take effective action in the world. But when you've figured out your own approach or position, then you can make a decision about what's going to really matter to you and to the other people that you go to work with.
Exactly. Yeah. And the way I think of that as deep adaptation as information processing about the actual state of the world, metabolization practices, and wise action projects. And the metabolization practices is the thing that's most missing. And if you go from information processing about the state of the world directly to projects and processes and groups, and it's likely to be reactive and to fail if people in the project can't deal with perpetual stress and overwhelm and reactivity and entrenchment and all those things. So that the metabolization practices of learning to live with distress and to transmute it into enlivenment. It's an embodied practice, it's a group practice, but I think those are being able to co-regulate our distress and not flip out into reactivity or overwhelm or inaction is probably the most adaptive skill there is. you know, as vital as being able to purify water or whatever it is, or keep pigs, or share, you know, it all requires metabolization as stresses increase. And
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say my default used to be curious enlivenment. You know, as a younger man, I would return to that. Was my natural default disposition. My default response to collapse is depression and overwhelm. And it's a practice. It's the metabolization practices that keep me returning back to sort of, okay, what's mine to do? Let's do it, and find the love and the beauty and the connection and the in doing that.
Yes, another aspect of it is that if we go straight from information processing to trying to take action, we are in some sense reproducing the colonial conqueror mind modernity that has brought us to this pass. If we don't stop, slow down, and metabolize our feelings and our knowledge and our reaction, then we risk enacting the reflexes that we've been taught. We really need to find something else, because to just reenact what's already causing the problem is not going to help us or others or the world.
Yes.
Here's a question. Why is it important that this metabolization process takes place in groups?
As human beings, we are deeply, deeply wired as collaborative sense makers. You know, our whole neurological, physiological system has mirroring and sympathy and empathy and all kinds of devices to help us make sense of things together. That was our adaptive edge in the past. And decades and decades of late stage capitalism, it's like it's wiped the village from human experience. So there's no mediation between the global and the individual. And when you're thinking about the complex, distressing, overwhelming global situation, it's just it's too much for an individual physiology. And so it either goes round and round and round and round and round and round and round, or we button it down. But in the village, in the group, it's a bigger container. And we all surface the distress and regulate each other and acknowledge and see and witness and share. And it's just a larger sense-making space to deal with these infinitely complex and overwhelming issues.
For me, the best thing about being in the groups is learning things I didn't know about how humans are handling the current problems. Because as an individual, hyper-individualized by society, separated from my fellows, getting my information from a highly mediated online ecosystem. I came into deep adaptation in 5 years ago now, 2019. And thought I knew something. I thought I had a clue. I thought, because my point of view was very well developed and I was going to explain it to everyone. Well, lo and behold, there are hundreds, thousands of other people, each of whom had their own very specific, very well developed way of dealing. And it was an eye-opener. It was a shock. It was like, whoa, the world is different than I thought it was. And I'm learning this directly from other people. And it's even more so in the personal groups that we do, the Collapse Club meetings and the meetings in the Deep Adaptation Forum, where we get to actually talk to people face to face. It is mediated through Zoom, but you get the real goods. You can learn about people. So my view of the world has become not only wider, but deeper, more varied, more realistic, I think. And that helps me shape my own views and then also understand better what the conversation is among people of goodwill who are trying to not make sense of it, because I'm not sure it makes sense, but who are trying to find an adaptation they can make so that they can live their lives under these conditions.
Yeah. And the questions we ask in Collapse Club: how do you feel about collapse? So that's the metabolization. How are you making changes to the way you live, and what are you learning by living in a new way? It's a structured set of questions to elicit adaptive wisdom, and you learn something from every single person on the journey, wherever they are on the journey. And it's the surprising things you learn. It's not, it's not about how to filter water. It's about how to wake up in the morning and endure, how to talk with the neighbors, how to, all kinds of different things that are always interesting and useful. Yeah. And that wisdom is in everyone. That adaptive wisdom and the village, it's just so essential to human experience.
Despite its limitations, the internet really is valuable because we can find a village among people who are all over the world. The village that we collect is people in Europe and the United States and Australia and New Zealand. We're an Anglophone group. We speak English, so that's a limitation. But meeting people with the same curiosity, with the same openness and desire to metabolize their distress is a remarkable result. Very comforting.
Yeah. And it's something else I was thinking about the other day. It's not just information sharing that happens. There's like a reset with our humanity. And oh God, this is what it's like to be in a village, to be seen, to be appreciated, to be heard, to be held. This is our humanity. And you just get that and you remember it and you recenter in that sort of humanitarianism that otherwise, if you look to the media and in general, you won't find that humanity. It's raining from the pond. But in Circle, you remember and embody that humanity together.
I recently have noticed that I read the New York Times, or I used to read the New York Times, and throughout my life, I've read the Times, and I've wondered, why don't I get a coherent feeling about human life from this thing, from this institution of information sharing? Throughout my life, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's got the latest news, but I cannot understand what human life is supposed to be about from reading this supposed, you know, document of record. It's like, this is the record of human experience, and it's missing a coherent story. I now realize that, of course, there's an agenda behind it, commercial, political, personal. There are people with giant egos running these giant institutions, and they have things they want to accomplish. So it's been really important and valuable for me to hear from individuals. Social media does some of that. You can actually find people with original points of view who are delving into their own truths and sharing them. Places like Reddit and Substack and Blue Sky. But even those, of course, are mediated not just by the technical problems of reading text on a screen, but the narrow bandwidth that we get through social media. So my point there is just that community of whatever kind, making a village of whatever kind, shifts the context in which one views collapse. You learn that it is a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and yet the commonalities are, they make you feel part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we approach enlivenment, and you mentioned wise action. What does wise action look like when it's informed by enlivenment?
I call it more than me enlivenment. It's that, you know, we're so hyper individualized. It's just, we're just corralled into this sort of very fragile, you know, hurrah for the individual. It's lovely to have choices. It's lovely to have your own style and your own opinions and your own, it's great. It's freaking lonely as well. And like I say, we're wired for connection, deep, profound, embodied, cultural connection, and it's missing. And more than me enlivenment is that thrill, that positive arousal of doing something good on behalf of more than just me. And that the whole, you know, liberal politic is around the sort of rational individual supposed to be maximizing well-being for the individual, and it's not how humans work. So it's a practice, and you know, being situated in a planetary crisis is inherently distressing. It's going to be for the rest of our lives, and it's going to get more stressful. But finding those things to do on behalf of more than me, whether it's a garden, the family, the neighborhood, whatever, finding that thing that you can do and do well and make some kind of a difference. What else are you going to do whilst you're waiting for collapse to arrive? You know, it's yeah, but it's not easy. That's the thing. That's another resource from the group that we get, is that it's a practice, it's an endeavor, it's an orientation. And we're going to get upset and depressed and despairing again and again and again. But the group helps you back into the zone. Yeah.
I know I rely on the weekly meetings to help me stay in the zone and to simply not feel lonely.
Yeah.
It's like, for me, that's the first step. Is I feel lonely. There's no one in my real world, barely, who I can talk to about these things or who shares my perspective. And then I go to a meeting and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. Here are people who are telling me about their lives, and it's something in common. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I was thinking that the separation that we're trained into is not only a social problem or a political problem or a psychological problem. For me, it's also a spiritual problem. Uh, Isolation is the opposite, if you will, of connection. And connection is valuable in and of itself. Relationship is the key to everything, and to find relationship to other people, to society, to nature, to the divine, whatever that means to you. It's finding the connection that is the key and the goal to everything. And in the long term, that has spiritual benefits. My personal belief is our ultimate state is everything's connected to everything else. And if we're working toward that connection, then we're doing the right thing. And if we're working away from that connection into separateness, we're doing the wrong thing. That's my fundamental value, the best I can determine. So the work that we do here is a particular species of working toward connection, and it is valuable for social reasons and psychological reasons and spiritual reasons as well.
Yeah. You see again in the again and again and again, commentators about what's wrong with the world. It comes up in all sorts of ways, but saying it's separation. It's humanity's separation from nature, it's mind separation from body, it's culture from nature, and the individual from the village. It's fractal separation. And that non-separation, however you find it, however you reconnect with it, is spiritual. It's not a supernatural spirituality or a religious spirituality. It's a really tangible, an immediate spirituality of reconnecting with what matters and who matters and why it matters. Yeah.
And that's what enlivenment means, connection to what matters, yes?
Exactly that. Yeah. And it's enlivening in every sense of the word, because once you act from there are tangible benefits for other people. You're either helping or supporting or inspiring, or you do get feedback loops even within the sort of overarching trajectory of collapse. There's going to be great feedback loops at a local level the more we can reconnect and enliven ourselves and each other. And it's not easy. Once you're sensitized to the distress, the bigger than self distress, it's not easy. It's a constant practice.
Well, we've reached the end of our time. And with that happy summary, we'll let it go for now. We'll talk more about the practices that can help us move from distress to enlivenment through a process of metabolization. We'll come back to that. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, David.
Anything you'd like to say, just to put a curly Q under it?
No, just how quickly these sessions go.
I know.
It's enlivening.
This is Collapse Club. I'm David Bound in Seattle with Matthew Paynton from England. You can find links and information in the episode notes below. Until we meet again, farewell.
Bye-bye.